Hey, how you doing?
Doing well.
Awesome. Good to see you again, Gwen. I think last time I saw you was in June. I think at a
Probably, yeah.
happy
You
hour.
were
Yeah.
visiting Mountain View, and we had
hmm
a nice small party.
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah, it was awesome. So good to see you again. I guess to kick it off for people who don't know who you are, do you want to give a quick intro?
Sure. So I'm Gwen Shapira. I'm currently a founder of Nile, where we're building Postgres for multi-tenant applications and kind of reimagining what databases can do for applications. Before that, I spent 7 years at Confluent, where I had a bunch of Apache Kafka related roles. I was in engineering and in product and in marketing and did some DevRel. And then if we go into ancient history, I worked on Hadoop, I worked on Oracle.
Oh,
I basically had spent 20 years of my life on databases.
that's awesome. I think on one of your blogs or Medium or something you described, indicated you had very heavy database experience. I think that's at least amongst friends, you're very well known for I think being a deep thinker in that area, as well as a deep practitioner. So that's really cool. And you said right before this, I was looking at your Blue Sky, and you said you were writing a really long blog post that you had to chunk into potentially smaller posts. So did I read that right?
I haven't chunked it yet. I think I will publish it as one big post, although I
Okay.
usually make the decision toward the end and based on reviewer feedback. If people tell me like, go and this is unmanageable, I sometimes chop things up. But this specific blog actually started as a talk. So I presented it at a few conferences, systems distributed over in New York in the summer, and then in the spring in Vancouver at the Postgres conference. And yeah, basically it just turned out to be a fairly big topic. It's something that you can talk about in an hour, ends up being a lot longer when you write it down with all
Oh,
the
that is true.
details and the side tracks that you don't really put into a presentation.
Wait. So what was this paper based on? What was this talk about?
Yeah, it was called distributed DDL at global scale,
Oh,
with the idea that Nile basically takes one kind of logical database and it can spread it across multiple machines and potentially multiple regions in the world. And you can then, if you have multiple tenants and it's kind of this multiple tenants in one database, you can say, okay, this tenant actually gets its own compute. This tenant actually happens to be in Southeast Asia. Everyone else is in East US. We give you this flexibility, but obviously we still want to preserve the experience of you have a big database. So what happens when you do create table? We want all tenants, whether they're in the US or in Southeast Asia, to get the new table at what is conceptually the same time. Or if create table
interesting.
for any reason fails, it has to basically fail everywhere. We cannot have some tenants get this new table and others don't. So it is not something that a lot of people spend a lot of time thinking about. Like we couldn't
Yeah,
find a lot of literature on how to do it. And we thought that the way we implemented it is interesting to other people because it's partially a transaction coordinator coordinating two-phase commits of those changes across the globe, and partially it's a Postgres extension. And there's a lot of different types
interesting.
of Postgres extensions. Some are simple, some are deeper. Ours is fairly deep. It hooks into a lot of areas in the insides of Postgres. So I kind of use this blog to explain how Postgres does transactions, how it processes DDLs, where did we choose to hook into, how are locks being managed. So it kind of just touches on all those database internal topics.
That's fascinating. When you mentioned what you're describing, it kind of reminds me of like a CDN in a way, but for a database. Is that a way of thinking about it, or am I off on that?
I wouldn't
Like,
put it that way
okay,
because they're getting smarter, but they're mostly focused on caching. And
yeah.
then
What I mean is the
usually
locality
invite
part of what you mentioned. So maybe. maybe I can describe what I think I heard you say because it's really fascinating. So what I think I heard you say is you're providing a database based upon locality somewhere in the world. Is that right or is that wrong?
We are providing a distributed database,
Yeah.
which could be in multiple regions,
Yeah.
but it's an actual database in each region. It's not a cache in every region. It's not
Right.
like there's a central database and then we cache it on different regions.
Yeah.
It's actually every region is its own database. You can read from it, you can write to it. It owns the data. It serves as a source of truth. It's just sliced and diced to the relevant regions.
Right. That's really interesting. What inspired you to work on this?
That's a great question because we started so far away from that.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to take you back 3 years.
Okay.
When me and my co-founder left Confluent, my co-founder is Suram Subramanian, and he used to be the VP engineering who owned the entire cloud group at Confluent.
Wow.
And so he had this experience taking this impressive distributed system and turning it into software as a service. And it takes a lot of engineers and a lot of time to do it. So when we left, we were like, there has to be an easier way to do it. We'll take all those people who are building software as a service and we'll build something like a framework, a service that will make it so much easier for them to build what they're building. And we started going along this route. We were looking into patterns from Kubernetes, like how do we do control plane? How do we do this kind of reconciliation loop so you kind of know what the state you want the system to be in, and we help you reconcile to that. So we had all those big ideas, and we worked on it for a full year. And it turned out that there are two types of people in the world: those who understand why they need it and want to build it themselves,
Mm.
and those who don't quite understand what the hell are we talking about.
Oh, okay.
So at the end of the year, we're like, okay, we still want to help those people. We talked to, I don't know, 200 companies building software as a service at this point. We had very deep knowledge of all the problems. It's just that nobody wanted our solution. So we're like,
Mm.
okay, let's backtrack, focus on the problems, and figure out a new solution. And when we looked at the problems they have, a lot of them were around, we have different customers. They all want to authenticate in different ways. They
Mm.
all want to have some flexibility to give different customizations to different customers. On the other hand, they also want to have very easy management of this entire group of customers. And when we spend a lot of time thinking about it, we think the right abstraction to solve it is not a control plane, it is a database. We'll have a database that is actually aware of the fact that you're using it to store data for many customers, many different areas, authenticated in many different ways, served maybe through different domains, bake all the ideas around authentication and authorization into the database where we believe
Mm.
it belongs, because this authorization at the end of the day applies to the data that the customer stores. You have a service, the data in the service is not your data, it's your customer's data, and you need
Right.
to protect it and give them access. Having a database that is essentially wide open while enforcing access at the application layer, which is the normal way of doing things, is pretty scary when you stop
Yeah.
to think about it for a bit. So like we think we can do better. We think that nobody the SaaS revolution, where everyone was building those multi-tenant B2B applications, it happened in 2010-ish.
Yep.
Nobody stopped to rethink databases at that point. Everyone went along with the databases that existed since the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
So we wanted to try to rethink databases for this kind of application.
That's a really good insight. And I've worked at SaaS companies as an engineer and built SaaS apps in multi-tenant on these old databases. And yeah, I think as an engineer in the back of your head, you're sitting like, this seems kind of like an anti-pattern, but it's what we have. And the frameworks we're using, whether you like Rails, Django, whatever, supports this paradigm. So we'll just go with it, right? But it is a hack because I mean, at the end of the day, you're doing a SQL query to look up NID, but there's no guarantee that um, you know, that you'll always get that ID or maybe accidentally get somebody else's, and that's a huge, huge problem.
Yeah,
So
and as you add work clauses, you keep having those, where tenant ID equals. And on simple queries, it's easy and
yep,
obvious that you'll get the right result. As you start doing more joins and the queries get
yeah.
more complicated, it's super easy to inadvertently make a mistake and leak data, which is a very scary idea.
Oh yeah, especially when you have cascading permission streams down, this
Exactly.
is a huge problem.
Exactly. It gets really complicated and it also gets non-performant, like
Hmm.
heavy applying those filters and authorization rules when you have complex queries, we know from experience can get extremely slow. We invested quite a bit into optimizing things around this.
So what were some of the big aha moments in kind of the structural rethink of what a database should look like for multi-tenant?
I think we had two big ones. One was we were having a conversation with one of our early design partners and customers. And this was someone that we talked to on a weekly basis for weeks before that. So it was maybe like, it wasn't like conversation number one, it was like conversation number eight or something. And when we explained how something is expected to work, you could see that he's not quite getting it. So he was thinking really hard and we were trying to give examples. And then at some point he's like, "Ah, it's like a database. I can treat it like a database."
No way.
And we were like, exactly, we're like a database. And then we left the call and we're like, so if we're like a database, why do we have those weird JSON-based REST APIs and we don't support SQL? This has to be confusing
Mm,
to people. I mean, people expect databases to have SQL. So we kind of started like, okay, if we start with the idea that we're a database, what does it imply? And we came up with a list of things that would make it easier to think about us as a database. And so that was number one. The second one was about 2.5 years ago. You may or may not remember, there was a huge outage from Atlassian. They had partial downtime for just some of their tenants for what seemed to last like weeks. I think it was more than a week, maybe even 2 weeks. This is gigantic outage. They obviously lost a lot of customers in the process. Every single competitor was like, "We have discount for everyone losing it, living at leisure." It felt like a disaster. And when they published the postmortem, which was very nice of them and it was detailed and interesting, it seemed like it started because they applied the migration to all the tenants, but some of them had customization and the migration didn't quite work or
oh,
broke something. And then they needed to do a rollback, but only on some tenants. And they didn't have good tooling to do it. So they kind of had to hack some tooling on the fly, which, one thing leads to another, and 2 weeks later, you manage to get your system back. And for us, it's like, yeah, everyone runs this kind of system where you upgrade all tenants at once, even though for some of them it may be a problem, and where it's nearly impossible to roll back one tenant.
hmm.
Nobody has the actual tooling to roll back a single tenant if something went wrong. And we're like, we think we can solve it. This is something we know how to do. And nobody else knows how to do it, but everyone needs it. So it
That's
was it
super
was a
cool.
very exciting moment that you see this really painful problem in the real world, and you're like, I think I can do something about this one.
It is a super painful problem, and but it's not like the sexy problem to solve, right? So I think people kind of ignore it, like, I guess we'll just
I
deal
would
with
say
it.
I'm somewhat over 40. I have stopped being sexy about 2 decades ago. I don't think I'm worried about sexy problems to solve. The one thing that was important to us is that the problem will resonate, that
Yeah.
people hear about it and say, oh, yes, this is a problem we have. Because if nobody says I have this problem, we will not have customers. So we did do a lot of conversations to make sure that people say, oh yeah, I have this kind of architecture and you're right, this is a big problem. So that we can, before we actually went and to the effort of building a solution, essentially.
Hmm. Did it turn out well?
It's very early to tell. That's the
Yeah.
scary thing about startups is that even after you have customers, you're like, is it enough customers? Am I growing fast enough? Is
Oh,
that
it's always the question.
like it's very hard to know if you're being successful because even as you grow and things get better and better, you basically have more and more problems as you have more customers and more users. Things seem to be getting more complicated and more difficult. So it's very hard to know if things are working out okay or not.
Oh yeah, I was talking to an engineer at another database company the other day, and it's interesting. They're still pretty early on, but I think they're like, yeah, we're not going to go to the big banks or anything just yet, probably for a few years until we can work out a few things because we actually don't want to take big checks from anybody because we want to make sure we're on the right path. Because at that point, if you take on, depending on the type of customer, you start talking about customization inevitably and all these other things, and you're like, cool. So we're just trying to figure out our product still, and
And there is something scary about big checks and the implications that now there are people whose jobs, whose production launch, all those important things actually depend on you. And I think it's a big, huge difference from I'm working in a company to I founded the company to like, yeah, people basically trust me with
yeah.
all those really important things and I better deliver. While if you're part of a larger company, it's like people trust Google. They don't trust any specific individual at Google to do anything, right?
What was that like jumping from, working in tech, right? I mean, at a systems level and database level for a long time and various roles at Confluent and writing a book, by the way, and then going into starting a company. What was that journey like?
That's a very open-ended question. Let's see if I can say something interesting. I would say that I always dream of starting my own company. And in many ways, Confluent and its success is what gave me the opportunity to go ahead and do that. Like I was no longer dependent on the next paycheck to actually survive.
Yeah,
So I was like, okay, this seems like a very good time to take a risk. So and I also met good people that I wanted to do it with. And I was very lucky that at the same time that I was like, maybe I will leave and start a company, Ram was thinking basically the same thing and had really good ideas. The initial focus on SaaS was from him. And when we took the leap, it's kind of interesting. It's somewhere between like I have full freedom. I get to have the whole view. I can decide what is the most important thing for me to do today. What should we build? What will it look like? What will I be calling customers today? Will I be writing a blog post? Should I record a video? Like you have all those different things you can do and full freedom to decide what will be most impactful. And on the other hand, there is something about this accumulated stress and sense of responsibility that like at any given moment you never feel like you're doing enough. There is no,
mm,
okay, I'm done with my work for the day because you always feel like you could do more. And I know that if things go wrong, if this customer leaves, if this feature flops, I will be asking myself, could I be doing more to make it successful? It's all on me, right? It's our my very small team. We are still Nile is at this point still 10 people. They're all
mhm.
amazing, like top engineers, but it does mean that the responsibility and therefore the stress of any specific person is very high.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's I always call it's like the Red Queen effect, right, from Alice in Wonderland. Like you run faster and faster to stay in place. And hopefully you keep going somewhere. We go somewhere at some point. But I mean, it's just the work. I guess the point is the work never stops and it keeps piling up. And the more successful you get, the more work there is. And that's just how do you prioritize? I've always wondered because I have the same problem. And I look at my to-do list. It's as probably as many things as like there are stars in the universe at this point. So how do you prioritize things?
Yeah, after I give my answer, I'm really curious about your answer.
Okay.
I would say that there is basically two categories of things, right? There is the things that are obviously the sky is falling. If I don't do it today, horrible, horrible things will happen. Whether it's a deliverable that I promised a partner or a customer, or something in the production systems that I need to stabilize ASAP. Like there are some things that are just obvious that this is what you need to do right now or else. Filing taxes when it's April 15, the usual. And then there are the things that you don't know for sure that are important, but there is a little voice inside you that says this can be big. Like
Give me an
we,
example of that. What?
so let's say half a year ago, um, actually about a year ago we launched our support for PG Vector, which is Postgres' vector database, and we did some improvements to support very large number of tenants, add some efficiency, and we launched it, and there was barely any reaction. And we forgot about it. There were so many other things to do. About half a year ago, I was reading some message in a mailing list, and I was like, actually, the things that this person is trying to solve would be a lot easier if he were to use PG Vector and Nile.
Mm,
But he probably doesn't know it exists because we forgot to talk about it. We said something in an announcement 6 months ago. Nobody knows this thing exists anymore. So I basically dropped everything and started writing examples and writing documentation
mm.
and writing blog posts and recording videos. And I spent probably 3, 4 months. We even found some partners. We did some announcement to a model, for example, is a good place to run your actual LLMs. So we're like, okay, here's how we integrate with model. Here's how we integrate with AWS Bedrock. So all those, we launched a lot of things. We went out and found partnerships and documented integration and all this. And it was like 3 months of just all in, heads down, writing examples, recording, all those. And it was just because it was like an intuition that, this is the right time. We were like, okay, maybe RAG is not necessary. And then it was so obvious that RAG is not going anywhere, that every single write-up that says maybe you can do well without it did not pan out.
Hmm.
It is here to stay. And in many ways, you can get better privacy, you can get better performance, you can get a lot of the things people want out of their AI. You can get it if you use Nile to store your vectors. And it felt so urgent to tell the world that, hey, all those things you're trying to solve, you can actually solve if you use us. That we couldn't do anything else for a while until we felt like we spent enough effort telling the world that you can do it.
That's awesome. But it seemed like it was based on a hunch, right? Like you saw this post or whatever, and you're like,
Yeah, 100% a hunch. So how do you
interesting.
prioritize things? Are you more hunch driven or do you have something systematic?
I'm systematic on the administrative stuff. Like I have certain days of the week where I'll just like, invoices, whatever, busy work that get done this day. Other things get done that day. I mean, I'm actively trying to figure out how I could use agentic workflows actually to start automating a lot of work, and I've been really um, diving into that. It seems like it's still super early, but I feel like this is again hunch based, right? You don't know,
Exactly.
but I feel like the technologies hopefully going to get better. I mean, there's a lot of promise there, so I'm trying to figure out just my motto is delegate or automate, and if we can figure out ways to automate. I can start a new company right now, right? I started a new company, which I'll be actually announcing at Day-to-Day Texas. Um, and in that case, I have a chance to start fresh with everything, right?
Oh,
You can start an automated AI native first company from scratch, and that's
so
kind of
can you
super fun.
share what you're using for, like, do you use an agent framework? Because I'm also kind of dabbling in that now and I'm really curious.
I haven't settled on anything just yet. I think like. So I've been going to all the big ones. Obviously, Claude just announced some interesting things, or Anthropic did with the compute beta stuff, and then Gemini would supposedly they have Gem's supposed agent workflows. I can't seem to get it to work. So, but I'm doing experimenting with some API stuff and so forth, and then Cruise another one that seems kind of promising. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's but I I look at that and then I also just ruthlessly create tickets for everything. But again, this becomes one of those things where the tickets may end up just getting completely ignored. So I'd like to figure out a way to make a ticket, then just have something take care of the ticket, whether that's a person or a bot. So, um, but yeah, I mean, the to give you an idea of what I'm working on, it's content and media related. So there's obviously a lot of potential with AI there, in terms of even just editing and proofreading stuff. And so I've been taking advantage of all that for sure.
Yeah, I already use AI quite a bit in my writing. So at first I used some tools to try to autocomplete what I write, and
Hmm.
it was absolutely impossible for me. I felt like I'm trying to think and someone is shouting in my ears their
Yeah.
ideas. I couldn't focus at all. What I do now is after I'm done writing, I ask the AI to act as an editor and kind of
Mm,
tighten things, obviously fix my grammar. I'm not a native English speaker and my grammar is all over the place. And I do feel like this leads to better results. Like sometimes the AI has good ideas, like, hey, can you put a personal anecdote somewhere
mm,
over here? And I'm like, yeah, this would be a nice place for a personal anecdote, actually. So treating it as an editor, also, I don't know about you, I have long experience ignoring editors in my life.
mm,
So it feels like the correct kind of collaboration where the AI is making suggestions, but it's still my voice writing it and I'm in control of the output, which
for
is
sure. I feel the
very
same
important for
way.
me.
Yeah, I think you've had a human editor in at least one book. How many books have you written? Like one? I know one of them is the
Oh,
talk about it.
written two books and then one of them had two editions. So
Nice.
yeah,
It's awesome. It's so
it's a lot of writing.
it's a
Books are
lot of
hard,
writing.
as you
But
know.
so are blog posts though. But yeah, I've been using AI as well for that. Not for the writing part. I think that kind of steals you from the experience of writing. Plus, I don't know. I think it kind of outputs the weird stuff. But
Exactly.
I use it as a kind of the old rubber ducky, so to speak. Like you just talk to it and ask questions. I do it all the time to bounce ideas off, and it's like
Yeah.
it's good. It's getting better. So
That's another thing people don't talk about. Startups can be pretty lonely.
yeah,
Like, even when I have a team, they're all really busy doing other things, so I can't always interrupt them. Like, I need to brainstorm some ideas. I want to bounce some ideas. So AI is actually pretty good for this bouncing some ideas
it's
and
really good.
seeing things from other perspectives.
Hmm. Yeah, like the other day I was just asking it, okay, I have this like my personal website which I need to redo. Like what's some SEO stuff I could do, right? To achieve these different things. Like what are some taglines I could use? Like how would you go about doing this? Like it had some great ideas actually.
Yes, I completely agree. And I also used it for SEO. And a lot of the ideas is like, how did I not think of it myself? But it
Yeah.
really distills, there is so much stuff on the internet about SEO. And it kind of distills all this stuff that I really don't want to read into some good insights that I can actually use.
Are you encouraging your team to use AI as well?
I wouldn't say that I'm encouraging it.
Uh-huh.
I'm allowing it in the sense that we have GitHub Enterprise, which comes with Copilot, and
Oh yeah.
I actually had an engineer ask me if they're allowed, if I have any concerns about them using Copilot, and I'm like, no, but I'm going to treat your pull requests as yours.
Yep.
So if you cannot say it's crap because I wrote crap, I'm going to pretend you wrote, for better or worse, I will pretend that you wrote every single line of
Absolutely.
it.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm 100% fine with if they decide to do it. I've definitely reviewed code that I have strong suspicion is was written by AI, but I'm keeping quiet about it. None of my business how they produce code, right?
Yeah, and I guess if it works, it works, right? But it's one of those things where I feel for engineers now, you're gonna have to know what good code looks like versus non-performant code, and it's
That's a
it's
very
harder.
good point. And I know that a lot of engineers rely on AI to help learn a new language.
Oh yeah.
And it's interesting because in many ways AI can help you learn like, idiomatic patterns because it learns from a lot of existing code, so it will know the idioms. And it's also really good if you kind of mark few lines and like, can you explain to me step by step what does it exactly do? It's very useful. On the other hand, AI sometimes hallucinates.
Oh yeah.
It can hallucinate syntax that actually does not exist, libraries that actually don't exist, and also sometimes it forgets things like deallocating memory when something exists. So it's very much a mixed bag at this point, I would say.
Yeah. That's interesting though. But kind of back to the vector database part too. Um, what are your thoughts on the vector database landscape right now?
There's so many of them, right?
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
almost as big as my to-do list, but yeah. But
it feels like the early days of NoSQL, where
yeah,
like
it
every
does. That's a
day
good
there were
point.
like 10 new ones. Um, yeah, one of the reasons I really like PG Vector in all this landscape is because it's actually based on very tried and true technology. Like there is something about running with a database that has been around for like 35 years that give you a lot of confidence to sleep at night. Like if I were to run a database that was completely from scratch as a service, I think my life would have been a lot harder. This way I get to rely on really, really amazing community with super strong engineers that, I did not hire. I don't have to review their code. And it's just with all this years and years of experience and like production stability behind it. And the other thing is that most vector databases are essentially NoSQL. They are not key value store, but they are vector indexes. You search them using nearest neighbors, algorithms, and optimizations. But essentially, you search for nearest neighbors, you find n nearest neighbors, and the metadata that comes along with them, and that's about it. While Postgres obviously gives me all the joins that I need, different indexes, different filters if I want to combine vector filters with additional types of filters. It obviously gives me transactions with ACID. So I can say, okay, let's insert all these vectors, insert all the metadata, update all those aggregations, and commit. And then
Yep.
either all of it has happened or nothing has happened, and I will not have my database in a partial state. And it's something we obviously take very much for granted. But looking at the entire VectorDB landscape, they have to invent transactions basically from scratch. It's not because they spend a lot of time focusing on the vector index optimizations. They now have to backfill all the things that Postgres has been doing for the last 35 years.
Hmm. Is that why you originally went with Postgres? Is because of the just the battle tested longevity of it?
We went with Postgres for two main reasons. Three, maybe. One of them was that, yes, it's very stable, very reliable database that we had a lot of trust in, and so far has very much earned the trust we put in it. The second thing is that it's popular. We could say to people, we are built on Postgres and they would like it because a lot of people like Postgres.
Hmm.
The other database we considered was MongoDB. And the
Oh,
reason
interesting.
we considered Mongo is purely for popularity. Like we
Hmm.
wanted something that will not be a reason not to do Nile. We wanted something that people will not look at us and say, what the hell are you guys doing, essentially? Like we didn't want the equivalent of we wrote it in Haskell kind of scenario.
Yeah, right. Oh, that's
And
funny.
then the last one is that Postgres is really, really extensible. It's fantastically extensible. It has all those cool things you can plug into it and hook into it and call us before you commit a transaction, call us after you commit a transaction, call us before every command, call us after. Like all those places, let us peek into the memory for a bit and make some decisions. Give us the parse tree for the query so we can extract some things out of the parse tree. Like all those things already exist. It's really a joy. I'm not exaggerating. It's a joyful experience to extend the Postgres. It's just a really, really fun system to work with.
It is. I love Postgres to death. It's a great DB. But so Nile does multi-tenant, is multi-tenant database. So is there a notion of multi-tenant RAG then?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, because if you think about it, if you have, let's say that you are building an AI for sales,
Yeah.
or hey, I heard some people are building AI for content creators. So naturally, you will want the AI to refer to maybe my past writing or some reference material. I can say, hey, I'm using those papers as reference to my blog. Can you check that I am actually referring to them appropriately or whatever? So I'm giving it material. I need all the answers from your AI to actually refer to the materials that I gave it. It will be a bit of a catastrophe if it refers to materials that someone else gave it, or
Hmm.
if it tries to give me suggestions based on someone else's blog post. This would be a catastrophe. So we definitely need every tenant to have its own source material with its own vectors. And when you say, hey, find me relevant vectors, relevant documents based on vector similarity, I need you to only search the documents that belong to this tenant. So this is a place where isolation really matters. And it turns out that it's really, really good for both performance and recall. So one of the big problems with RAG is that as you get more and more documents to search through, either it takes longer and longer, or you need to start applying approximate nearest neighbor.
Mm.
And approximates are lossy. Sometimes it will not find the
Yeah.
perfect document because of the way the index and the algorithm works. So if you have millions of documents in one index, it's a bit of a problem. If you have thousand indexes, each one with 1,000 documents, you can actually just brute force scan and find the perfect document. So it just solves so many problems all at once that this is why I was so excited and like I have to tell the world that this thing exists.
That's so cool. What's been the user interest in RAG so far?
As you can imagine, a lot of people are building AI systems that rely on RAG, whether it's the AI for sales, AI for marketing, AI for legal advice has been popular and requires tons and tons of documents in order to find the relevant ones for each question. A lot of it is basically ask a legal question and it has to use both general law information and also specific contracts that a specific company has and specific internal guidelines and so on. So there is obviously just, and I'm just talking about text, but there is
Yeah.
also, people apply RAG to images, to videos, to all kinds of things. So it seems to be exploding. Like again, like every few months, someone says RAG is dead, and I'm like,
Yeah.
it looks not just alive, but rapidly growing from where I'm standing.
Are you seeing use cases where people are combining the data in the relational Postgres database with the data in their um, vector database?
All the time.
Yeah.
Even if they don't use PG vector, I see it.
Interesting.
And one of the big patterns is graph rag that
Yeah.
people tend to say that using vector similarity is just one way to find relevant documents. You may want to find them based on timeline, based on tags, based on other things. And also, once you find some similar documents, you may want to use relations to find other relevant information. Like, okay, this is a document, but let's find the authors. let's find other documents by the same authors. Now, all this could be done in graph databases, and graph rugs tend to recommend that. But guess what? Relational databases like Postgres are all about relations.
Hmm.
They are, in fact, built for finding things that relate to each other, and they use joins. And my experience is that a lot more people are familiar with SQL than with the graph database syntax.
Oh yeah.
So unless you have something that actually requires graph capabilities, like, shortest path or depth first search, if you just need simple relations, like from this point, you have a document, grab the authors, grab the other documents by those same authors. This is very simple and very straightforward to do in relational database like Postgres. So we are seeing a lot of those.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting. Because I, side notes, I'm working on this book on data modeling, which will be out early 2025.
The
But
world really needs that, by the way. I've been having back of my mind the world needs a book on data modeling, like in generic one that is not tied to a specific technology
yeah, yeah.
forever. And I'm so glad you're writing it because it means I don't have to.
Oh yeah, no, that's it's because what you mentioned is exactly what I've been thinking about is that the world's data is really the use cases across applications, analytics, machine learning, these are all combining, but also across different modalities of data. You mentioned Postgres been around 35 years. Yeah, relational databases, right? Structured data, rows and columns. But as you know, it's extensible. It's sort of the Swiss Army knife for all other types of data. And the world is just moving towards an agglomeration of different data, different use cases. So you have to be able to combine all these techniques now. It's
Exactly. And you see a lot of that. And that's part of why Postgres keeps being
yeah,
popular is that, as people want to use, let's say, DuckDB for analytics, they find ways to shove DuckDB into Postgres.
yep,
I've seen people put the Arrow data format for analytics
yeah.
into Postgres. So
That's so
it's
cool.
just something that the level of innovation sometimes just blows my mind.
Oh, it's insane. I would love your take on this right now. So, we're kind of filming this mid end of November 2024, but there's news coming out that maybe we've sort of hit the sort of the asymptote in terms of the performance gains we might expect from LLMs going forward. What are your thoughts on that? And what do you think comes next?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. I would say that first of all, this is really normal, right? We always find a new technique. It kind of takes humanity to the next level, and then the gains level out until you kind of find the next big step up. And now I am so far from the world of deep learning that I will not be able to tell you where the
Sure.
next big gain for machine learning is going to be. But I think until we find the next big gain, I think there will be a large period of basically reconsolidation because people have
Mm,
been so excited about LLMs that they forgot that there is a lot of other useful machine learning and a lot of other useful
yeah.
analytic techniques. And it's actually, you get a lot of power by combining them. So I was trying to use the popular LLMs, I think Llama and ChatGPT and Cloud and Gemini to analyze some data. I basically gave it a very large amount of availability data from various backend systems. And I said, somewhere in there is an incident. And I want you to give me the chain of events, like what failed first and what happened, and kind of like how did it recover and so on. It completely failed. All four of them failed miserably. And it turned out that once I prepared the data correctly, I applied the normal data analytics technique with, moving averages and aggregations and all those things, and I gave some cleaner data. Now they gave me a very good human language story that I could present to, my manager or in a post-mortem meeting. So once the data is in a very good shape, it does really well in like writing a nice post-mortem kind of thing. But it's horrible at actually analyzing the data and getting large amounts of data into a good shape. So I'm like, okay, this is great. We already have a lot of techniques for analyzing data and getting it to a good shape.
Hmm.
We already have all those tools. We have AI. Let's combine them. Let's have each one of them do what it's good at. And there is so many other things like that, recommendation systems.
Yeah.
There are tons and tons of existing techniques that are really good for recommendation systems, really efficient. We spent decades building those. Now an LLM can show up and kind of explain the recommendation in a nice, friendly way that people will enjoy reading, like a personalized restaurant guide. So I'm looking forward to see a lot of those combos of LLMs with slightly older, more robust techniques.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and I completely agree. It feels like um well, it's funny because we used to call it machine learning. Now it's AI, even though it's still machine learning. I put Apple Intelligence on my iPhone. I'm about to delete it actually. Or just it's kind of annoying because it
So do you
summarizes
have
things.
iPhone 17? That's why you put Apple Intelligence?
Oh, what's up?
Is that only on iPhone 17 or could
Oh, well,
iPhone?
I have the 15 Pro, so it has 8 gigs of RAM, so it can fit on that, which I guess was one of the constraints. The new ones, I think you can run it, and but yeah, I mean, it just summarizes text messages for me. Like that's neat, but text messages are
Yeah,
only
so
like
text
about a couple
messages are not
sentences
even
anyway.
that
I'm like,
long.
what's the point? But but it's interesting because we start conflating AI with a lot of these old techniques. Like you mentioned recommender systems. It's like literally like, well, some of them they're complicated, but a lot of them just correlation analysis. It's been like
Yeah.
done for ages. But so yeah, I agree. And I was actually speaking last week at a university and was just talking about how, a lot of the techniques you've been learning, the classical stuff, these are great techniques that have been shown to work, like and embrace them. Because I feel like it's sort of what happened with deep learning back 10 plus years ago, where deep learning came out, then suddenly everyone tried to apply it everywhere,
Oh
with
my
mixed
God,
results.
everything was random forests. And they weren't even all that good. At least LLMs are good, better for a lot of things. And like there was, I think 2 years where back then I was at Cloudera, I was advising customers on all
Mm.
kinds of data science problems. And everyone wanted random forests. And it didn't matter, like, look, I know what is the correct statistical technique to use here, and it is not random forest. Are you sure you want random forest? Everyone wanted it.
It was popular for a bit. So, but now it's LLMs, right? And it's like you
Exactly.
throw LLMs at everything, and
Exactly.
um,
And they're not always the right technique for it.
no, I mean it's an expensive technique, if anything, right? I think you can get away with a lot cheaper ways of doing stuff. So,
That's exactly it. And if you can really compress data, clean data, like all those things, if you can basically use fewer tokens, it will
hmm.
be cheaper and you will get better results because
Yeah.
attention over large tokens is still not what they claim it's supposed to be.
Kind of closing out, like, what are you excited about over the next year or two?
I mean, growing my company, like
Oh
just,
yeah.
when you have actual customers, they have problems. And for me, it's just so motivating to attack and solve those. And then some of those are scale, some of those are latency. I want Nile to be a lot faster at a lot larger scale than it is today. I'm really excited about the way local first is going and how people push data to the edge.
Oh
And
yeah.
sometimes the edge is a nearby data center, but sometimes the edge is this device you have in your pocket. And actually, as you said, has quite a bit of memory, and you can load quite a lot of data there and just use it that fast because it's in your pocket. So I'm really excited about the trends of having data pushed everywhere and how those pipelines of distributing data everywhere are going to pan out.
Does Nile incorporate WASM?
Blossom?
Oh, WASM, sorry, WebAssembly.
No, we don't. It is a personal obsession, but we do not incorporate WebAssembly at all. Did you have a useful way we could incorporate it?
Well, I don't know. I have to see what the architect. But it's I know Mother Duck does something similar to that, right? Where they kind of have this hybrid, in browser, then or kind of local, then cloud.
Yeah,
But
no,
it's
we
an
don't
interesting
do it.
offering.
We may
Yeah,
partner with others who do it in order to move
yeah.
all this
It's
experience.
interesting you mentioned the local first stuff though, because I always thought that like if you look at okay, so yeah, I'm sure you have a phone, smartphone. I think we all do. But okay,
Yeah,
so it's sitting here idle right now, right? And the
yeah,
thing is, like, imagine how much computer just sort of sitting there that could be used for something.
totally.
Yeah,
Like, with less compute than that, humans go to the moon. It's
yeah,
unbelievable.
it's insane. And even our computers, like, I was flying the other earlier this week, and I noticed that I just had to sit back and just laugh for a second. I made a post out of it on LinkedIn and got a lot of views on it. But I just said it's crazy seeing people use these souped up, MacBook Pro Ultras just to send emails and do Slack messages. I'm like, these things, you realize how much power is in these machines. It's
Yeah,
insane. And it's like,
exactly. And I do think that when you take together the fact that your data is on someone else's system, so you have one system that actually hosts data for a lot of people and a lot of customers, one of those chunks of data is actually quite small. You can
yeah,
definitely push it around to the edge, to devices. If you want to train a model in a small device,
yeah.
there are more, as you will notice, they are more than capable of doing that. And the new MacBooks ship with a lot of GPUs, and it's really cool to see how you have those Olama and local llamas and all those things that are built to run those even fairly large models on essentially a desktop or even a phone.
Oh yeah. Like the computer I'm on right now, it's a Mac Studio using an M2 Max. So it was a couple years ago, but it's like 30 GPU cores,
Amazing, right?
which is a lot, right?
Yeah.
It's
You know how much I pay for renting just one or two of them?
exactly. It's like it's crazy. So, um, well, Glenn, it's been great to talk to you. Good luck with everything. I think you're on. It's awesome seeing the success you're having and the stuff you're building. So, really
It
cool.
was a really fun conversation. Thank
Yeah,
you so much.
anytime. Cool. See ya.